which I think it has. Is that right, Sarah?
Just waiting for the confirmation.
Thank you. So welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. In addition to the Cabinet members and other councillors present in the room, we also have some councillors joining our meeting remotely. Those Cabinet members and councillors present are councillors Toynbee, Harrington, Crockett and Bowen. Thank you. I'll now just check that the councillors joining us remotely can hear and see. We have Cabinet members joining remotely. Councillor Hardy.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Leader.
And I'm not quite sure whether Councillor Davis is joining us this afternoon, but she's not on the screen.
No, she's given apologies. Sorry, Leader.
Apologies for Councillor Davis. Cabinet support members. We have Councillor Hardwick.
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you clearly.
I think that's all of the Cabinet support. Thank you very much. Group leaders, we have Councillor Terry James. Terry, you're on mute. Pound penalty.
Sorry, I can hear and see you clearly. Apologies.
Councillor Lester.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Can see and hear you all. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews.
Councillor Matthews gives his apologies and I'm substituting for him.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. Councillor Fagan.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Councillor Wilding or his substitute.
I'm afraid we don't have a substitute.
Okay.
I'm unable to find it.
Thank you. Councillor Howes sent his apologies, I believe. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can hear and see you. Just let you know I won't be able to stay for the full meeting. I'll stay as long as I can.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stark.
Yes, thank you for the invite to this, my very first Cabinet meeting. I can hear and see you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Councillor Stark. And Councillor Christy Balderson, I think, sent apologies. Yes, thank you. We also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they're called upon. I'll now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you are not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. I will do that myself in a few minutes. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives, where appropriate, to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room. Only Cabinet members physically present in the room may vote. So item 1 of the official meeting, apologies for absence. They've been received from Jenny Bartlett, Councillor Chance, Councillor Tyler, Councillor Davis, and Councillor Howells, Councillor Balderson. Any others?
And Councillor Matthews.
And Councillor Matthews. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you so far.
Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett.
Yes.
Sorry.
Declaration of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? See none. Thank you. Minutes. That's item 3, to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of July. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Cabinet members, are you content that the minutes are an accurate record? Thank you very much. And thank you to the Minute Secretary who got those minutes out very quickly in time for this meeting. Thank you, Secretary. Next item, item 4, is to receive any questions from members of the public. We have received 2 questions from members of one question from a member of the public. and a response has been published. Does this questioner, Mr. Fancourt, have a supplemental question?
No, it doesn't.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So item 5, to receive questions from councillors. We have a question from one councillor, from Councillor Milne. This has been responded to in writing by Councillor Harrington. Do we have a supplemental question?
No, I've not received this.
Thank you very much. So moving on then to the first substantive item on the agenda today. This is about nutrient certainty, Luston Integrated Wetland. As the competent body for the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017, as amended, Cabinet is asked to note the progress being made towards creating integrated wetlands phosphate reduction and steps being taken to ensure nutrient certainty to the required standard of beyond reasonable scientific doubt. This item starts on page 12 with the agenda pack. There is also supplemental paper which was published today. And I'll turn first, if I may, to Councillor Harrington, who will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. There are essentially two aspects to this. The first aspect is confirming that we have nutrient certainty on the measures we put in terms and the mechanism we've got for trading phosphates through our wetlands in the north of the county. And I'll ask Rachel Joy to give some more detail on that. We had this meeting in May. This is a confirmation of that of the decisions we made. June. The other aspect of this is around the Phosphates Commission. We're conscious, acutely conscious, that we as an authority have made this intervention to allow what is only a mitigating mechanism for people to be able to trade phosphate, to be able to build in an area that's had a moratorium now for over 3 years, and which is costing the building economy of Herefordshire potentially up to 380 million. But we have not been able to yet tackle the issue of the pollution in the river, as much as we've struggled to do that with engaging with all the different agencies, engaging with different authorities, including the Welsh Authority. And so we wish to support the work that Councillor Swinglehurst is doing fantastically on the Nutrient Management Board to provide, in a sense, a body within the council, within the cabinet, that is able to act more progressively and more directly to allow us to lobby and to see what we can do within the mechanisms that we have as an authority to make an impact. So I shall hand over to Rachel Joy to give an outline of both those elements, and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrington. Good afternoon, Cabinet. When I reported to you back on the 26th of May, in terms of the wetland, we were there or thereabouts, but not quite over the line in terms of being able to say, yes, we have absolute certainty that the design of the wetland will be able to take phosphate from a water treatment works, measure it, process it through a reed bed, reduce the amount of phosphate, and get us in a position where we could provide some betterment for the river, which is important, but also some development headroom, given the backlog of now around 2,000 houses in the north of the county in terms of housing applications. Since we met in May, further work has been undertaken with our designers, Woof, our peer reviewers, Ricardo, and also with our QC, leading to several challenge sessions where we carefully reviewed the design line by line. Obviously we can't discuss it in open session, but you will find the exempt paper that deals with the design questions, that provides us with that certainty, the peer reviewers' comments on it, and also the QC's comments in terms of we've done all reasonable due diligence that we could be expected to do at this stage using the appropriate tests. So we're able now to bring forward the recommendations that you do agree that we've reached certainty and move to a position where after the call-in period, we can begin to trade phosphate credits. I can confirm that the cells on the Luston wetland side have now been cut. Diggers are on site building the cells. We have done a lot of work over the last few days with the Environment Agency and Welsh Water on the whole question of permitting and finalising the permitting issues. And we believe that we will get permission to start receiving effluent within the next few days so that planting can take place on site. And then we will be, actually delivering phosphate reduction, because the moment we start receiving water into that site, phosphate reduction begins. So very close to those reductions now. And what we're suggesting is that through a planning condition while the site is being completed, any superfast builders don't actually occupy properties until we're absolutely certain that everything is in place and working properly. So that's all I'd like to say on the wetlands, which is, we're nearly there. We are working with we're working on the other sites to bring those forward, and obviously we will, update you and others as further credits become available. I'd then like to turn to what next. And clearly the report shows that there is a continued challenge on both the lug and the why. There are continued issues that we need to address in order to make sure that the water returns to favourable status, as residents are telling us they want us to achieve, and they want our partner agencies to achieve, and our neighbouring local authorities to achieve. So we're really challenged around what more can we do. We have our economic development function, which is a lever. We have our planning function. We have our research and policy functions that can provide insight and information. And we can bring those together along with the work that we do with our partners to support the Nutrient Management Board, which our partner bodies are set up to deliver the river improvements. But we recognise that there is insufficient capacity within the technical advisory group supporting that to actually deliver the progress that we need at pace. So the council has a significant role in this. We get calls by the week about our wetlands and what we're doing there, and I'm presenting nationally to the Planning Advisory Service on Monday to a group of practitioners there about what we're doing. DEFRA are saying we're way ahead of others. So really this is continuing at pace to look at what more we can do. That will pose challenges on the planning side. It will pose challenges for how we work with the farming sector to transform, and how we work with other sectors to play their part too. But this is all an important part of the local authorities' convening function and providing good community leadership to the biggest environmental challenge we face as a county, probably after climate change. I will stop at that point. There are the supplementary recommendations that provide the final legal advice or constitutional advice about the Commission for you to see. So we've just provided some supplementary recommendations there. And I'm sure Councillor Hitchener, you'll want to refer to the scrutiny discussion on Monday, which also feature in the supplementary papers.
Yeah, Rachel, thank you for that reminder there. I'll have the first go at this, if I may. First of all, I can picture these diggers starting to work at Luston, and I think that's tremendously exciting. We're just waiting with this bit of paper, and the water can start flowing into that. So it really is something which is very live, and thank you for that picture. I then move on and think a little bit about how we're then going to start these buildings, these houses being occupied, was what you were referring to. So it might be the case that some houses have actually already been built. Would that be right? I'm trying to work out if I was a builder or I'd apply for planning permission. What should I be doing next, or what would I be expecting?
that is an important and significant question. As you know, you agreed a first come, first served interim policy in May. As a result of that decision, we've already contacted those developers at the head of the queue to start pre-work with them on readiness work so that we can process their applications. So nothing's been built yet, but if anybody's a fast builder, we just want to make sure that the wetland is up and running, hence a planning condition around the date of first occupation, which will be lifted as soon as we're absolutely certain. But we now are in a position to be the first in the country to trade phosphate credits.
So if I was a builder, I'd be waiting for a letter from the council.
If you're at the top of the list, you'll have had a letter from the council. I think letters are going to others on the list. And also we have a website with full information on it. And we are constantly in touch with the development community, particularly through Mary Albright's group, to keep them in touch with what's happening and to take informal feedback and listen to what the development sector is saying about this. And we'll continue to do that work, Leader.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's not a question, it's really comments. As we all know, we have been exploring ways of addressing this horrendous phosphate situation in our county rivers. Councillor Harrington and the directorate he leads on have considered and continue to explore ways of reducing the unacceptable levels. Today we're presented with how this can begin to be achieved. This report deserves the recognition in this plan, including where we are and where we are going. I fully support this report and applaud the YNUS Foundation on their report, but also note that this is the first step of a long commitment and journey. We need to improve our environment and commit to future nutrient certainty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. Anybody else in the room? No.
Yes.
So after scrutiny committee, I think Sebastian.
If possible.
Yes, I've got in the order. Yeah. Any cabinet members remotely wishing to? Yes, Councillor Hardy.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Councillor Harrington and Councillor Swinglehurst and Rachel Joy for all of the work that they've done to get us to this point. It's been a huge frustration, I know, particularly for our small developers in the county, and really damaging to the health of their businesses. And by opening up credit trading now, with the certainty that we have of a very rigorous assessment process of the approach that we're taking, hopefully we can start to allow development that's been long planned to come forward in the north of the county once again. And I'm sure everybody's really pleased to be on the cusp of doing that. We have the resource in the planning team to ensure that the applications that have been sat waiting for this button to get pressed have got the resource to be able to process those, and hopefully we'll be able to be dealing with those in a reasonable time frame so that developers can get building, and that's hopefully going to be something that we can continue as further wetlands come forward, and we can work with our partners to make that happen. So I'm really supportive, welcome this report, and agree with Councillor Crockett. This is a first step on a long journey, but it's a long awaited one, and I'm really glad to see it with us today.
Thank you. The second element of this report, I guess, is about the terms of reference for the Phosphate Commission, which is our next step for what has been mentioned. It's a tough tasked to work on this, and we need some terms of reference which are deliverable, and where we know exactly what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. So those terms of reference have been tabled rather late to the scrutiny committee, but the scrutiny committee have had a quick look at them and come up with some recommendations. And I think I'll turn, if I may, to Councillor Stark, if you'd like to comment on the status of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We did look at in detail at the TORs because they weren't published 5 days before the scrutiny committee met, but we did have a general debate on the idea of a cabinet commission. I welcome the leadership that this council has shown on this particular topic, but can I remind cabinet the genesis of this go back to January in my motion on the WPZ, which all councillors voted for unanimously. So the two recommendations before you today, Chair, one is on how we actually include a wider range of elected members in the work of the Cabinet Commission going forward, because that vote on the WPZ showed that all elected members have a stake in this particular important issue. And while I admire the leadership, I'm slightly concerned it doesn't become a closed sort of body, and that those that have the knowledge across the council, as their voices are not somehow heard. I have seen your response to that recommendation, where you have agreed in part to looking at how you include these experts across the council. But please, this is a council-owned issue, and I think the best way forward is to share the load and to ensure that as many councillors as possible have the opportunity to be involved in this debate going forward. So that's my first comment. And I know you're going to be looking at that over the recess, and I look forward to seeing your recommendations for that at my meeting in September of the SSC. The second one is more about buy-in, and I think this is key because it can be overlooked. I did ask the committee on Tuesday to look at whether we should recommend to you the widest possible buy-in that we could get from all strategic partners, from both governments in Cardiff and Westminster, as well as from neighbouring local authorities. The recommendation before you is more limited because I think members felt that that was too ambitious. So I'm happy to see that in your response, Leader, you have included key strategic partners. But can I add, please, that we must continue to engage with Cardiff and Westminster, because at the end of the day, we are going to need interventions from them at a national level to actually get to the sort of solutions that we need here. And we may very well need funding from them. And the last thing I want is for us to be left having to rely on the measures that we have, the funding that we have, and the resources that we have as a council in order to effect change here. Because with the best will in the world, we are not going to achieve everything that's required in order to restore the rivers to the healthy state that they deserve. So I'm pleased with your response. I look forward to how you're going to involve the wider membership of the council in this very important process. And I look forward to getting progress on how you are bringing key partners and the two governments along with us on this particular journey. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Stark. I'll turn to Councillor Harrington to respond.
Yes, I'll respond first, then you might want to, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Stark. Just a quick correction. The genesis of the wetlands was unfortunately not yours, but you are a leader, and you have been very strong on this, and we certainly you've led on the water protection zone, which we support entirely.
I wasn't meaning the wetlands. I was meaning the actual Cabinet Commission.
Absolutely. Sorry, I beg your pardon. And I do want to go back and thank Mr. Willamont and Rachel and councillors in the past, like Councillor Chowns, who first tackled the idea of the phosphate credits. And you're right, Councillor Stark, this is mitigation only, because that's the only option we had to us as a council. Everyone knows that the control and the responsibilities of our rivers, the Lug and the Wye, are with the Environment Agency and Natural England. And so we are limited, as you know well, which is why you brought forward the Water Protection Zone motion, which we all supported. The frustration we have is that we have a body like the Nutrient Management Board, which Councillor Swinglehurst ably battles with and battles through. And as she knows herself, very often it was difficult to get people to engage adequately at the beginning, recently when we had the moratorium through that board. And you're right that we're in this position then where we can do not a huge amount as a council, because the statutory agencies and the government are supposed to be in charge of these responsibilities. And so what we wanted perhaps, which kind of comes back to your point, is the actual the executive making those decisions and directly lobbying the government in a sort of process-driven way. And we can't do that without the feedback from members of scrutiny and members across the council. And so I do support your suggestion that we make sure that that is fed into. But I think what we're saying is we want a body that actually can take recommendations from people and directly influence, whether that's through the planning process or lobbying government or anything else that's open to us.
Yes, I think I'd only add to that about the idea of engagement. I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Stark. We need to get buy-in. We need to get engagement from the widest possible spectrum. Now we've been in discussions with Paris for probably 2 years, talking to them about these issues, with engaging with Natural England, Environment Agency, central government. We've been doing it over a long period of time, exactly for that reason, to get engagement, to get buy-in, and we're not going to drop the ball with that in this stage. We'll be continuing that with this commission. There will be engagement. We have to get buy-in. It's interesting, I think, that the River Wye starts off in Wales and ends up in Wales, and we're in the middle. So we do have to engage with the Welsh local authorities if we are to achieve what we need to achieve. So yeah, it's a complicated issue. We are taking them along with us, and I look forward to some solutions which will get buy-in. So I think you can be reassured on that, I hope. I'll pass now, if I may, to Councillor James.
Thank you. Oh no, I'm not muted. Sorry, this time. Yes, I broadly agree with everything else that has actually been said. I mean, other than, I think we've got to bear in mind, this is not the answer in the long term, and we need government to act on the more serious consequences of the river pollution, and that's farming practices and effluent discharge within the rivers. And that's where the bulk of this is going to be cut, has to be. And government is the only body that is in a position to do something radically about that. And we need to keep lobbying in order to do that, for them to do that. Because, you know, I'm afraid I don't like, in principle, whilst I support what we're doing, because we are where we are, I don't support the principle of offsetting. You know, the person who goes on a jet plane and plants a tree, flies to Australia and then plants a couple of trees and thinks that's solved all the environmental problems, I think is wrong. But anyway, I fully support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Lester.
Thank you very much. We welcome the developments. The Conservative group welcome the developments. I wonder if it would be opportune to allow Councillor Swinglehurst to have some comments, because she's one of the key people who's involved in this issue and has done a sterling work at chairing the Nutrient Management Board, as we'd all acknowledge. But I'll leave that up to the leader of the council. But just three specific questions, if we may. It was mentioned about writing to developers on the list and writing to developers at the top of the list. But can we have clarification that all applicants through the system that have been held up by the phosphates issue are going to be written to advise them about this process? We would like that assurance, because some large housing developments have been held up, and that's a huge cost. But obviously, even those people who are really wishing to, go forward with their one house have been stymied by this process. And I would appreciate it, and we would appreciate it if all caught up in the moratorium could be written to. We're aware. That's my one question. Second, we're aware that the government is trialling some nutrient trading schemes across the country. So there are those schemes afoot. Has there been work done to ensure that what Herefordshire Council has done, and was one of the front runners on this, their scheme is going to be compatible with whatever the government are exploring? And then the other question we have is that it's laudable that you have the wetland scheme, absolutely, but that one scheme is not going to obviously solve the problem, and the problem can be mitigated by those in the private sector, those developers, those farmers. So what assurance can we have that there'll be further work done to incentivize and to encourage housing developers to be part of the solution with, they're building their houses, including a wetland or something like that? So what is in the pipeline to ensure that when talking to developers now, that's going to be part of the discussion, if at all being feasible? So if we could have some answers to those questions, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harrington, are you able to answer some? Or?
I'll try and answer some, and then I think Rachel Joy will answer the ones that are more precise. So just on the last point about what we're going to ask developers to do, we're obviously going through a core strategy, local plan refresh. And as a planner, Councillor Lester knows that we can't really enforce conditions that don't exist. So that is part of the process. And yes, we are considering precisely the kind of metrics that he's talking about. In relation to who's been has everyone been informed? Everyone has access to that information. I think there was an original email that went out to everyone, and everyone has access to the website to be able to see where they sit at the moment. I'll just check with Rachel Joy that letters have gone out to individuals. What was the other couple of questions?
Government trading schemes in the future.
Yes, well, I think without sounding like we're blowing our own trumpets, I think we're actually ahead of the game on this, but Rachel Joy will confirm that or otherwise. And precisely the point of using national consultants like Ricardo is the work that they have been doing with other authorities. I think wetlands is not new, but trading accurately through the wetlands, that was the really significant thing that Hereford did first, because we were able to produce a calculator through Ricardo's, which was then double checked by the EA, who then became very interested in it and almost, I wouldn't say quite nicked our work, but not far off it. Rachel Joy, you would like to take over at that point?
I'll pick up from there, but yes, firstly, those developers at the head of the queue I know have been contacted because I checked earlier this week. I will go back and make sure that the planned letter to all developers on the list has gone out. If not, it's imminent, because it is right that we should, update all developers as to where we are, so that they can at least see where they stand in the queue, even if some might be waiting some considerable time. We welcome the proposals by government last week. We also have to bear in mind that this is a proposal to go in the Levelling Up Bill, which is its second reading in Parliament in committee stage, has to go through the Lords, and therefore we expect it will probably be very late this year, very early next year, with a good wind before that can get into a delivery stage. As the only authority with experience of start to finish on building nutrient mitigation schemes, no other has achieved it yet. You can imagine we've immediately reached out to government to offer our support and our expertise to help accelerate this issue nationally. But we've also made the plea that Wales needs to be remembered in this because of its impact on the Wye. We've made the plea that the Wye is close to failing, and therefore we will need support on the Wye. and our wetland schemes, as you know, are just touching the sides on the lug, and therefore we need more support on the lug as well, although we are appreciative of the £1 million from the LEP. In terms of private trading schemes, I think my comments to developers have been, look, we need to remember that this is venture capital startup territory. And therefore the first sort of personal advice I would give is to treat it like that and form a consortium to understand and better syndicate risk, because our experience is at every stage there are barriers. But we stand willing to provide advice to those who want to bring forward private schemes. I'm hopeful that we can get Natural England, our planning and ecology services, lined up in the room at the same time to provide joint pre-application advice, so that we provide advice in harmony, because I think that that would be extremely welcome by developers. I hope that assists you, Councillor Lester. Have I covered all of your questions?
Well, there's an opportunity for you, Councillor Lester, if you want another question. If I may, I'll make an observation on this idea of venture capitalists. Of course, they look at the risks and they want a decent return. So going out to venture capitalists as a council, at the moment I don't see any justification for doing that sort of thing. If we can make some turn on this, we should do it ourselves. It comes to mind with PFI and that sort of thing, where there's a long-term project, and we know that these wetlands have to have an 80-year period to have maintenance, and I would be awfully concerned about venture capitalists who are not interested in 80-year projects. The other element to that is that I feel we've learned a lot about this. We have some unique knowledge, and to actually just put that out in the public domain and give to venture capitalists strikes me as being an inappropriate thing to do. I think we've done a fantastic job. We should carry on. We've got some other wetlands to come up with. Of course, it might be that, Councillor Lester, you're not talking about the letter from central government, which has been talking about venture capitalists, but the idea of the entrepreneurial farming community we have in Herefordshire, who are looking at other new methods of ways of creating carbon credits and all the rest. And we do need to encourage that, and we will be looking at these projects from time to time. Just at the moment, we need to focus on delivering this one, which is having a fantastic impact, or it's going to have a fantastic impact on the local economy.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just make the one point? It wasn't necessarily focused on venture capitalists. Have in mind, if a housing developer wants to come up with a project and then add a wetland project in, or a farmer wants to have development but wants to add that project in, it's more that was more the point I was making. And is there a situation where we can encourage that as part of a planning application for whatever is required? So that was the main thrust of the point, rather than setting up venture capitalist situations.
Yeah, that's right. I think I picked up that. So yes, Rachel, your ideas about individual builders having their own.
I do apologise. I've taken you down a rabbit hole. I was suggesting that the mindset be adopted of business startup. You know, this is a high risk area and people need to go into it with their eyes open, but we're here to support it. I wasn't suggesting that this is handed over to venture capitalists. I was using that as an analogy in terms of risk leaders. So I do apologise.
Rachel, going back to Councillor Lester's point, so there are developers out there who are looking at developing sites, and they're coming up with innovative ideas. How are we responding to those at the moment?
As I say, we would encourage them to take pre-application advice. My hope would be that we could get Natural England and the Environment Agency in the room to work together on it, so that advice is provided in harmony. At the end of the day, I think at an early stage, we need to identify whether that's a right scheme, because it's at the point that somebody buys land or decides to allocate land in this way, that they're beginning to take expensive costs in terms of purchase. And then, of course, they've got expensive development costs. So I would encourage early pre-application advice and continued pre-application advice to support them through it. And it's on my task list to bring Natural England and EA better into this process.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Bowen, I think your turn next.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this affects my ward very much. I'm sure it affects other people's wards as well, but we have in Laston, we have this wetland system being constructed, and we also have about 8 or 9 houses to be built by Border Oak, who've been frustrated in their efforts for the last 3 years, basically, not a bit more. And it'll be very good to see something happening. Border Oak, I think particularly, have been feeling the strain of not being able to develop their excellent houses in Herefordshire, or a lot of Herefordshire, and it's affected their business quite considerably, I fear. And I would like to see that this whole system in place, so we can actually get people building in the right places, the right sorts of houses. That'd be excellent, I think. I have one concern, really. One shouldn't think that because you're buying some credits, or you are no longer having to bother about doing anything yourself. And that's been something that's been leveled against carbon credits, I know, in the past. And I think we've got to make sure that people don't say, oh, we can buy lots of credits and then we can do nothing ourselves. That would be a great mistake, I think. I hope also that it won't be just reed beds, but also willows. They are also probably the most efficient gulpers of nasties you can possibly find. And if you talk to Jay Abrams, Biological Design, he will tell you all about those. And it is certainly, I think we're missing a trick if we don't use a lot of willows as well as reeds, if I may say. And we need to talk to our Welsh planners or close to our border, and whose planning systems seem to have loosed torrent of nastiness down our rivers. And we should be very cautious about that ever happening again. And I hope that the Welsh planners are now thinking about matters rather more, and not just saying, oh, that's England's problem now, not ours. That is something we should be very aware of, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, I just have a quick response. I think Councillor Byrne was expressing some views. The question, I think, which is the one question to respond to in terms of trading, it's a very fair one. I think other members have expressed concern about trading. I think the difference here between carbon trading, which we're very fortunate, is that carbon trading, you can buy a tree in, I don't know,
Timbuktu,
well, wherever, and then you can then go and fly first class to New York if you'd like to. This is directly related to the river, so you can only buy to remove the phosphate from the river. So that is in that regard, that is one thing that we're fortunate in. But the general point is that you're right, we don't want to commodify, deal with pollution, and we're trying not to here.
I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Leader. There's such a lot to say sort of on behalf of the Greens, but I'll try not to say too much, but just to thank everybody who's been involved in getting this far, because it's been really, really tricky and a huge amount of work has gone into this. So, congratulations and thank you. Saying all that, we obviously have an enormous way to go, and sort of my colleagues have kind of already raised questions that I've been thinking about. I mean, I think our own planning system is absolutely key to this as well. And we need to sort of really look at that and make sure that we tighten up absolutely every sort of tiny thread that we have to, because this is not just about Environment Agency or Natural England or Natural Resources Wales. This is also about us, and this is about how we respond. And obviously planning is absolutely key. The issue of private development private schemes is also crucial, because we cannot do this alone. I mean, it's fantastic to set it up, but we really need our partners within the county to sort of be able to take this on. So I think that the more work that's done in looking at this area of how we encourage sort of private activity in restoration and the nutrient neutrality would be really good. I have a couple of questions. One of them is, first of all, do we have the resources in planning to actually deal with the increased workload that's going to come about from sort of releasing housing? So that's one question. The other is, currently, how many houses are we looking at possibly being able to accommodate? And the third one around that is sort of looking at the Natural Resources Wales information, sort of latest planning information, where they've actually relaxed the requirements on developers because of the source apportionment. And I'm just wondering, you know, is there a way that we can actually look at working in tandem with Wales on this? Because obviously housing is a significant contributor to phosphates, but the latest source apportionment information is that 72% of the diffuse pollution is actually coming from agriculture. So while this is fantastic, and I see, you know, this is really important in terms of housing, we talk a lot about housing, but there is this whole agricultural question as well, which we've really got to deal with, because that is the crux of the problem, according to all the research that we've seen. And I also just wanted to ask, I know that the terms of reference for the Cabinet Commission are still being determined, but I'm just wondering, you know, will a member of that commission actually sit on the technical advisory group? Is that what's envisaged if this has come about because the technical advisory group is sort of doesn't have the capacity to deal with it? And my final point is just about the principle of polluter pays. I mean, we've got here the housing sector paying, sort of making a massive contribution to developing this nutrient neutrality scheme. We've got Welsh Water talking about investing a lot of money in sorting out their problems. Is there a way of us looking at how the agricultural sector can contribute towards restoration as well? And Lida, I do completely agree with you about how we look at a pathway out of this for agriculture in the county, and looking at restorative and sort of a more regenerative agriculture as a sort of way forward for Herefordshire is going to be key to us dealing with some of the agricultural issues facing us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got 5 questions down there. I don't know who wants to start. Probably actually Councillor Harvey about capacity in the planning department. Do you know how many applications are outstanding? I think it's about how many applications can be granted.
Well, I haven't got that information at the tip of my fingers, but I did say when I spoke earlier that we had secured additional resource in readiness for being able to process these applications as the phosphate credit trading released them to come forward through the planning process.
Thank you. And I think some of the other questions really will be resolved through the terms of reference and through this commission, which will look at polluter pays. We'll need to have a look at farming, the impact, regeneration practices, source apportionment. So I think those will all come out in the terms of reference and the commission. I'll ask now Councillor Swinglehurst, who has an extraordinary amount of knowledge of this subject. And then Alyssa, just thank you for all the work you've done to get us to this stage.
Thank you very much, Leader. And I think first and foremost, I'm going to give absolute credit and congratulations to Rachel Joy for getting this first one over the line. It's infinitely complex. It takes patience and it takes a lot of work. We are leading the way. I've been to a number of meetings where you've got authorities who are only just starting to have the conversation. And they're saying, well, we might try having a wetlands. Anyone got any idea how that happens? And I'm, well, yeah. And we can reach out and support them and help them on their journey, because we've been there and done that now, and we've got the wetlands. So brilliant job. And that wouldn't have happened without the support of the cabinet, the administration pushing for it. So credit to you all for getting it done. And I remember actually started with Simon Evans, who's sort of slightly tiggerish about everything, saying yes, the wetlands would be great. And so it started from that, trailing around soggy fields, looking at potential sites and poking them with a stick, and it was it's great. There's an intriguing potential because of the nature of rivers, of upstream and downstream, that where we've got neighbour local authorities who are struggling because they haven't got an upstream, and we can help them out with that. So that's kind of reaching out as well, not only with our knowledge, but with the geographic specificity of our relationship on the river with the downstream neighbours. What was I going to say? I was going to say about the commission idea. One of the things that I think would be very, very helpful, and picking up the point that Councillor Stark was making about the WPZ, that is one of those things that is going to need pushing from every side, and it would be really helpful to have your shoulders to the wheel on that. And I know you stand ready to do that. So thank you very much for your work on this, and thank you, Rachel, for getting the first wetland done. Well done.
Thank you. Right, well,
can I have another small bite?
yeah, small bite, yes.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of your group, I would emphasise rather than your own personal stance
No,
necessarily.
it is all, obviously, this is all part of the group thing. I hope that Welsh Water are thoroughly involved, because I know that they have too many licenses to let everything flow. If they get a bit too much rain, they need to upgrade their systems quite considerably, and that's we've been at them for a long time in certainly Luston Yarpole area to do this very thing, and it's being, we say, problematic. And are the NFU and the Farmers Union of Wales fully on side and doing training for their farmers so that actually they work better and pollute less?
I can't comment on the Welsh. I think my comment on the sewage is that the letter just come from Greg Clark and George Eustace, saying that by 2030, sewage farms, sewage, there must be no more sewage put in rivers.
No more combined sewage.
Thank you, John. So that's really upped the game quite a lot. So that hopefully will deal with 25–30% of the issue. We still got the other lot to deal with, and it'll be a strange situation when 100% will be from agriculture once that sewage issue is resolved, if the government gets to that stage, which I think will focus farmers a lot more because they will be their responsibility. So I think we'll move on if I may, and I'll put the recommendation to the cabinet, slightly amended recommendation. Amendments were approved, I think, this morning on the website. So recommendation that the cabinet A agree that all necessary due diligence to confirm nutrient certainty has now been achieved. B, authorize the corporate director of economy and environment to commence trading credits as outlined in the phosphate credit pricing and allocation policy agreed by cabinet on the 26th of May 2022. And C, establish a cabinet working group to be called the Phosphates Commission, Restoring the River Wye, to consider how the council and its partners can progress the wider systemic and strategic issues needed to address phosphate pollution in the Wye. D, agree that the terms of reference to the Phosphates Commission are agreed in writing by cabinet, with the final terms of reference and membership of the Phosphates Commission being reported to the next available meeting of cabinet. E, to approve the response to the recommendations of the Environment and Sustainability Scrutiny Committee as set out in Appendix 4. And finally, F, to establish a commissioning provision of £60,000 and delegate to the Corporate Director of Economy and Environment in consultation with the Deputy Leader of the Council, commissioning expenditure decisions. All in favour? Thank you very much. So we now move on to the next item, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Plan submission to government. And this is to seek Cabinet approval to submit the UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan to government on the 1st of August, which is next Monday. Government has allocated Herefordshire 7.6 million, subject to the submission and approval of an investment plan. This item starts on page 61 of the agenda pack. Councillor Chowns would normally have presented this item, but she isn't around at the moment, so she sends her apologies and I've agreed to speak to this item. So as explained, Herefordshire has been allocated 7.6 million of these fundings to be spent over the next 3 years, subject to submission of a plan, which is proposed here. The UK SPF funding is primarily revenue funding, and it is critical to providing support to our businesses to help develop the skilled workforce that we need and to help local people into an employment, and to support our communities and develop our places as a vibrant place and location to work, live, study and visit. As explained, it is revenue expenditure, which makes a huge difference compared to capital expenditure, which is what we tend to be offered by central government. So it's a pleasant change to be given revenue expenditure. And whilst we welcome the allocation, it should be noted that it is significantly lower than the funding the county has received through the EU funding in the past. Over the last 5 to 7 years, the county has benefited from £25 million of EU funding compared to the 7.6 million now allocated, of which nearly £1 million has to be spent on an adult numeracy programme. The guidance requires that we establish a stakeholder board, which we have called the Herefordshire Sustainable Growth Strategic Board, HSGSB, which include representatives from across business sectors, partnerships, so it's representatives from culture, from business, from education, and these are from across the whole county to help us oversee the development of the plan. It's interesting that the government are requiring us to consult with this wide group of people. I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to engage more with the business community, and I do commend that. It's a little bit of a halfway house compared to the Stronger Towns Fund, where the Stronger Towns Fund was very much driven by business. This is more a consultation, and the consultation will continue, I guess, until these monies have all been spent. So I think it's a great opportunity to engage with people in the community to make sure that we are listening to them as to what they think the needs of the local community should be and how we should build it and develop it. There's a requirement to spend the first £800,000 in 1922-23. So that's the current year, which leaves very little time to work up activities to meet these local needs. But in a similar vein, we've had to put this project together quickly, which it seems to be the way the government goes about it at the moment. So we felt the best option was to go out and find a third party who's helped us draw up this current proposal. You'll find at item 15 of the paper some explanation of this kind of status of Herefordshire as a county. It does not make particularly good reading, and I would hope that our submission drawing attention to these issues will catch the eye of government so that they can direct money towards us under their levelling up agenda. We certainly need levelling up in economic terms. I think I will stop at that point. I don't know whether Roger Allenby, whether Roger, you'd like to say any additional points, and then we'll go to questions.
I don't think so. No, thank you, Leader. I think you've covered all the key things. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from anybody? I mean, this is another good news story, isn't it? This is money that's coming forward, Diana.
Well,
Councillor
after
Joy.
you, when you finish. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for putting this together in the context of ever more funding streams and ever tighter timelines. I know it's a huge challenge, so I'm really grateful. As you said, Leader, this is part of the government's levelling up agenda. As you said, this is much less money than we were getting from the European Social Fund, but it's been branded as a sort of Brexit dividend, slightly ironically. And part of the levelling up agenda is supposedly about empowerment and devolution. So I'm really pleased that this is happening. It is a great opportunity. It's maybe debatable how much empowerment and devolution there is when there's so much detail and monitoring and reporting and everything. We've got to stick government logos saying levelling up all over everything we do. But anyway, there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I'm really pleased that we're doing it. And I'm particularly pleased about the delivering skills, delivering training, more opportunities for our young people, really important. And also, you know, as part of our social value as an administration, just, you know, a reminder that that's important in its own right, skills for quality of life, for human flourishing, for mental health, for society. So not just as an employee, but as a human as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. Any other comments in the room? I don't know. Councillor Harvey? Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Oh yes, I'd just like to echo the comments made by Councillor Toynbee on this. I mean, it's good that we've been signalled that we've got this money coming to us, and I thank officers for the work that they've done, looking at how we propose a programme which meets the timescales and the requirements of the government programme. The characterisation of the county that is included in this report is sobering reading in places, but that's not to do the county down. That's really just to recognise some of the challenges that we have. And, you know, although this is a lovely place for lots of people to come and live, there are still pockets of deep deprivation in parts of the county and some very serious issues that as a council we continue to need to tackle. So I'm really keen that as alongside approving this to go forward and be submitted, that we also make sure as a cabinet that we are straight away starting to plan for how we proceed to deliver on these projects, so that as soon as the funding is given the thumbs up by government, that we can start to make progress on actually making a difference out in our communities. So I hope we can be getting on with that behind the scenes whilst we're waiting for the deliberations of the ministry on the proposals that we submit.
Do you want to comment on that preparedness?
It's an excellent point, and we've just been having some discussions this week looking at because of the particular challenge in this financial year of spending what's quite a large amount of money probably from the autumn in the last quarter. So these funds are building on activity that's been delivered in the past with some of the EU funding, and so we're looking now at what we can bring forward and start to prepare for in terms of calls or procurement of activity in this final quarter of this year, as well as considering what we would like to do for the following 2 years. The other thing, I guess, the real opportunity that we've got is that we're also in the process of developing the big economic plan for the county with a view to bringing that back to yourselves in kind of December, January time. There's a real opportunity to then hit the ground running by using some of this funding that's hopefully approved in the autumn to realise your ambitions for implementing that big economic plan from the start of next year. So we're certainly looking at the things we can deliver in the short term, but also what we can be prepared for in terms of realising some of the big challenges we've got from the future in delivering the big economic plan from the end of the year.
Would it be necessary to come back to Cabinet for approvals to spend for this, or can we give consent in any way to spending up to a certain amount going to third parties or.
I think the expectation was we'd come back to you in the autumn with a decision that kind of set out a bit more detail around the actual activities you'd like to see, and the role of the board that you kindly mentioned, Councillor, as well, in terms of helping us shape some of the things we'd like to see delivered in the county, kind of working in partnership to do that. So we won't stop work on the submission after it goes in on Monday. I think, as Councillor Harvey quite rightly says, we'll start to work up the things that we can start to deliver now, and then be ready to bring that decision back to you once the money is hopefully approved, not too far away.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll go to group leaders. Terry James, Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, yes, I support the recommendation. We have to, but bear in mind, revenue is revenue, and government are very good, and they've done it in the past. I can remember many, many years ago, providing revenue from schemes. What happens when it runs out? Do they? And we need to be very careful that the particular schemes have an end in themselves that can be achieved with the revenue that is afforded us from central government. Because what we don't want is for schemes to be done and then find ourselves, the government funding has ceased, and from what we hear in the debates about potential prime ministers, it doesn't look as if the amount of funding is going to be decreased in all probability to public services and local government. We don't want to find ourselves in the position that in a few years' time that these schemes are up and running, and all we can do is either find it out of the council's revenue, which is going to be tighter and tighter, or close the particular projects down.
Yes, thank you, Councillor James. I think something we need to bear into account when we look at each project to make sure they are things which will last through, not just short term. Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. We welcome the funding and thank officers and all involved for doing the bid. Absolutely essential that this money is received for the council. We note the report, and I would echo Councillor Harvey's point. You know, it could be construed as grim reading, but it's absolutely vital that we understand what the challenges are for Herefordshire, and it's really important that we set that out and have a great understanding of what that is. And in my mind, and you know, from our group's perspective, you know, fuel poverty and that energy efficiency issues are absolutely key there, given fuel prices anyway. But the idea that energy is not being efficiently used is obviously something that we must address, and also the issue about the low wage economy and how we need to encourage our younger people to stay here because we've got the right jobs for them. So I think moving forward, the thing we would like to see with regard to this money and other monies and other council initiatives is to bear in mind every time there's a resource spent, whether it's a capital project or whether it's a revenue, how is this going to address the issues that are highlighted in this report? And so, you know, it's almost like if they're not addressing these issues, you know, is that really a good use of public funds? So it's a good measure of how we should be thinking about where we put our resources, because this report clearly highlights the issues that we have. But we welcome the bid and hope we get every single penny. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lester. Councillor Bowen, the views of your group?
Yes, I think in generally completely in support, and it is very interesting, I think, to read all the details. But I entirely support Councillor Matthews and not Councillor James. Sorry, in his comments about short-term funding. All too often we hear of these projects, excellent in their own selves, but limited because the government shuts off the money after 3 years or whatever their timescale is. And it can be very disappointing for those involved in these schemes and also rather damaging. And I think we've got to be very, very careful about that. And if we have got these limited options, can we find some way of continuing them and perhaps under a different funding scheme? So we actually keep on working really good schemes. And we might have to provide the revenue from other sources. I don't know if you think the same thing, but I do think it's a danger. And great to have the funding. Pity it's not anywhere near what we used to be having when we were in the EU.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate. But we've got to use every penny very carefully, I think.
Yes, so again, I think we need to look at each project to make sure it is sustainable. And however long we're funding it for, then at the end of that period, it ought to continue or it's achieved its objective.
One of those two things, yes, I agree.
Thanks, Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Leader. I think obviously the Greens sort of welcome the bid and really hope that the government sees fit to fund it. You know, thanks to everybody who's managed to put this together, because in such short time scales, it's really tricky when resources are tight anyway. I think it's important that we actually continue to develop projects in the county so that they are ready when these sort of crazy timescales come towards us. Just wanted to pick up the growth of the creative industries, and we all know what a kind of fantastic creative sector we've got in Herefordshire. We've got a absolutely fabulous art college. We've got you know, the Home Lacey College, etc. But one of the important things is that we continue to work as a council to actually provide these young people in the county with somewhere to live, so that they don't actually have to sort of leave the county and miss opportunities for the, you know, the growth of the creative industries because we can't actually support them here. So I think that Councillor Harvey is absolutely correct in saying that some of the reading in the report, some of the reasons why we qualify for this funding does make grim reading, and I think gives us the incentive just to continue trying to make life better for all of those who live and work in Herefordshire. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fagan. Okay, I think I'll put this to the recommendation to the vote. So I'll read these recommendations. First, the recommendation that A, Cabinet approve the submission of the Herefordshire UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan to government in order to secure up to £7.6 million of funding for the county. B, authority to make technical amendments to the final investment plan submission is delegated to the Corporate Director for Economy and Environment. C, should the investment plan be approved, Herefordshire Council agrees to be the accountable body for the implementation of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocation and the resulting projects. And D, authority is delegated to the Chief Executive Officer and the Section 151 Officer to formally submit the bids by the 1st of August 2022 deadline. And one hopes that the government website will be up and working. So last time we tried it was 2 weeks before they actually had the website.
Yeah.
Before we come to see the customer, we do have a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Harvey. Did you wish to contribute?
Well, a legacy hand.
No, I was really just wanting to come back and first thank the group leaders for the comments that they've made about the nature of the funding and the concerns that we've got to address in the county. You know, the reason that we were a net beneficiary as a county when it came to European funding was, you know, as a consequences of the cumulative effect of these challenges. And I really do hope that, you know, we get to see that the government will deliver on its promise to match the level of European funding that that regions and local authorities in the country did receive under the new Brexit arrangements. You know, the other issue that we have, which you see in this as a bid, is the very hand-to-mouth nature of the funding that we receive now. It's sort of doled out in dribs and drabs with short turnaround times for us to respond and short periods within which to actually get the money spent. you know, my preference, and I believe the preference generally of Cabinet and probably of most local authorities, would be to have funding secured over longer timeframes so that we can actually properly plan to spend the money and not have to take a knee-jerk approach to things. Inevitably, there will be a number of the projects that are going to be funded with this money, which will not sustain, which will have to be for fixed time periods, and when the money runs out, they stop. And that's not how we want to do things. We'd rather we built capability and we kept things going, and we invested in things that were going to have a long-term effect, rather than, you know, switch the projects on and switch them off as the money gets switched on and off. So we're making the best of, you know, the position that we're presented with. But you know, Councillor Lester, if there's any words of encouragement you can give to the blue team to do things differently, I'm sure all of us would appreciate it.
Well, if I could just say, I've been invited to quite a few Zoom meetings lately to discuss issues. So if I get the opportunity, I will certainly raise it.
Thank you, Councillor Lester.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Okay, so I've read the recommendations. All those in favour, show of hands. Thank you very much. Unanimous. So that recommendation is passed. So we now move on to item 8, which is 2023-24 budget setting timetable. The purpose is to seek Cabinet approval to submit a UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Yes, the narrative is slightly wrong at the beginning of this. What I'll do is I'll just pass over to Councillor Harvey to talk about this recommendation, if I may.
Thank you, Leader. These are some to follow papers which have arrived, which set out the proposed timetable for undertaking the budget and its the budgeting process and its consultation. Overall, I'm just juggling modern.gov to get the details in front of me. So the recommendations are that the proposed timetable for the development and adoption of the medium-term financial strategy, which will run over 4 years, and the 2023-24 budget be approved. And that timetable is in the papers at paragraph 19. And the other recommendation is that the proposed approach to budget consultation is approved. And what I'd like to say in terms of the information at paragraph 19 is that we are, in addition to the waymarks that you can see set out there, we are also anticipating that there will be front-end engagement with scrutiny to understand scrutiny's concerns and priorities and issues at the very front end of the budgeting process. I believe there's a date of the 5th of September for that, and that there will be other dates that form waypoints along this journey that aren't set out here yet because they're not confirmed. But this is the overall arc of the timetable for delivering the budget and going right through to council tax setting in early March 2023. The consultation process that we are proposing to undertake is an enhanced version of the consultation last year, which was inhibited to a certain extent by continuing COVID restrictions. We will be continuing to use the power of the internet and do consultation online. We'll also be doing working group type consultations using Zoom and to be able to bring people together and to talk in a bit more detail about aspects of the budget. I'm glad to say that the plan is to reintroduce the return of the face-to-face consultations, which which will take place in the market towns and the larger villages where there are suitable events taking place during the consultation period, for us to take a trailer and officers out to actually talk to people face-to-face and get their views that way. There is also an offer which Scrutiny has been very positive about, to meet with members of the Scrutiny Committee for connected communities, to look in a bit more detail about how we undertake the scrutiny process, and that's still on the table and intended certainly from my side to go ahead. So that's additional to the timetable and to the text in this report. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I think if I could just mention, Councillor Bolson, if you wish to comment, it might be helpful if you do so at the end of any questions from Cabinet. Your role as Chair of the Scrutiny Management Committee. Any comments from anybody? No, I don't actually see any. Any hands up? No. Councillor Bolson, I don't know whether you're there.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Oh,
Sorry,
great,
I was
okay.
late to the meeting today.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I sent your apologies at the beginning, so we'll change the record. Councillor Bolton, I don't know whether you want to talk about this issue of consultation.
It's certainly something that the Scrutiny Management Board is looking at introducing into its work programming. We've got our work programming session next week, hopefully to finalise elements around the budget. And I do welcome Councillor Harvey's contribution to that. My reading through the papers, though, my main concern around the timelines is the date for government spending review announcement is in the papers as the 24th of November. And I'm just a little unsure how realistic that date actually is. Normally it is a lot later. I think a lot of other councils do look at scrutiny, etc., post or late December. And I'm unsure how that, if things are delayed beyond the 24th of November, how that would impact the scheduling, because that obviously will impact the scrutiny timelines quite significantly. But we're looking to finalise how we can better scrutinise the budget, both from the budget setting process and also from a budget performance perspective as well over the next 1 to 2 weeks, and hope to have that finalised shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I think we're trying to work as much as possible with scrutiny and whatever timescales the government comes up with. It's a matter of working together on these things. But I'll leave Councillor Harvey, who may want to pass on an additional comment.
Yeah, well, if the date slides, then we'll have to take account of it. I think my keenness is that scrutiny makes a real positive contribution at the very front end of the process, which is what hasn't happened in previous years. I think sort of scrutiny in December and then scrutiny again in January is all a bit compressed. But I think getting scrutiny's views and concerns, priorities and suggestions at the very front end of the process, while the options are all on the table and the process is very plastic, I think is going to be really positive if that can be achieved.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think that's an interesting observation, because we as an administration are having to look at a budget to work it out without the benefits of the government review having been announced. So we'd like to share some of that pain, I think, with the Scrutiny Committee at that stage, so you can help work without those figures, and then we'll have another bash when we've actually got the data. Thank you. So I'll move on then. I think. Questions, comments, questions from Councillor James.
Thank you. No, I am unmuted, sorry. Yeah, well, work yet to be done, and we'll see what happens, but, you know, it is as it is. I don't think there's really much to comment on at this stage.
Councillor James say we are where we are.
Yeah.
Actually, he said it is what it is.
This is what it is, yes. Okay, so I'll move on then to Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. And we note the timetable, and it'd be good to have the Scrutiny Management Board to focus on this matter. Just a couple of observations though. First, I think when we reviewed this, talking with my scrutiny hat on rather than group leader hat on, when we tried to scrutinise the last budget as soon as possible, as per Councillor Harvey's request, we had meetings where we just didn't have enough information presented to us. So we were a little bit one arm tied behind our backs, and there were certain scrutiny meetings where there's just no financial information available, if I recall. But I think the thing that I appreciated an assurance on, and this is not to blame anyone, but you know, we all were aware of the fact that extra funding for children's services needed to come along, and that was completely not included in any of the budget setting. So our plea really is to, you know, for all departments to look forward and say, we can't leave anything out, because if you come back after the budget process, it sort of like blows a hole in all of this consultation and all of the group getting together about trying to ensure that the budget is feasible. So just a plea there that if there's any departments who think, hang on a minute, we're going to have more funds, now's the time to declare it, rather than what happened last time where it just skewed everything anyway. Just as from a group leader perspective, the more information we have, the sooner the better we can all think about what it is that we want to achieve when it comes to setting budgets. So, but note that, and I really hope that there is a good response from members of the public, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who contribute the most. So it would be wonderful if we could hear from them. Thank you.
Yes, I echo that, Councillor Lester. Councillor Bowen.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I think public consultation and trying to make sure the public are properly involved, and don't just think, oh, not one of those, and walk away. Let's try and make sure they actually enjoy the process, rather than thinking, oh, do we have to? So lots of zeal and enthusiasm for this, I think, is good. On another subject, I just point out to Councillor Harvey, when I was chairman of scrutiny, we were always very proactive in tackling subjects that were coming up, going to be interesting, difficult, or whatever. And we were very keen to be at the front end of it rather than the rear end of it. I think it's a much better way of working. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. I think the response from scrutiny will be sort of reflective of how our scrutiny process has sort of changed, and you know, it's going to be quite challenging to sort of meet those deadlines. I think if we had a sort of longer term settlement from government, it would actually sort of help us to avoid this mad scramble every year to sort of try and sort out the budget, and then sort of try and assume you know what problems are coming at us in the sort of very near term. So it's frustrating, but it's part of the process, I suppose. We have to go through to jump through the hoops. So let's see how it goes this year.
Leader, I just say, at the Harrogate conference, you may have heard this as well. We promised a 2-year settlement, not just a 1-year settlement, and there were pushes for 3-year settlements. I don't know if that's gone any further yet.
But yes, I think that came out of the mouth of Michael Gove. Yes, there will be a 2-year settlement, but of course there'll be a new minister now, so I think it's only going to be 1 year.
Well, let's hope we can push them into 2 years at some stage. It's quicker the better.
Okay, so I'd like to put the recommendation to the Cabinet so that A, the proposed timetable for the development and adoption of the medium-term financial strategy and the 23-24 budgets be approved, and B, the proposed approach to the budget consultation is approved. All those in favour, show of hands. Thank you very much indeed. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending. The next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 22nd of September. So this is almost the end of July. We are not due to have any full cabinet meetings like this in August. So I hope everybody has a very good time and has a chance for something of a break, a rest. Thank you very much indeed.